All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about how we're changing up our portfolio to become more tax efficient. Now, I want to say that we are not dumb. We went into this eyes wide open knowing the tax implications, but with our total income for the year being over $180,000, maybe more, it's going to get pretty serious at tax time. And I don't know that the strategy is working the exact way we want it to. All right, just because you're making a lot of money doesn't mean you get to keep a lot of money. The tax man wants his pound of flesh. And then now in retirement, what most people don't know or aren't told or whatever is ACA has cutoffs. So they're all like, oh, you can use Obamacare, which is the Affordable Cares Act health insurance, which is really good insurance generally speaking. I mean, you don't have to worry about a lot of different things that other insurances might cut you off for. But the problem is there are income limits, guys. All right, there's only so much you can make before you don't get a subsidy. If you don't get a subsidy, like us this year, you are spending for a regular old bronze plan close to $1,000 a month. All right. So if you go over 84,000, you spend $1,000 a month for a basic bronze plan. It's good insurance. We use it. It really works well. But that's $1,000 a month, guys. Now, with that said, there has been some changes, as there will be every year in your life, whether it's taxes, whether it's tax brackets, whether it's ACA healthcare, there will be changes. So you need to learn to pivot. But the new rates these insurers are coming out with for the exact same plan we're paying $1,000 a month for now is now $1,300. Exact same plan. Nothing's changed. So with that said, we need to get under that $84,000 level, and that same plan would be $600 a month. So making more can cost you more because between the taxes and between the increased ACA plans, we are making a lot less. So the sweet spot is to make it on paper look like $84,000. Now the only way to do that is become more tax efficient and kind of head for one goal of how much you're going to make. Now I'm going to explain some of the strategies we're going to deploy in this. We will do videos on each individual part of this later, but to put it very simply, if as a married couple, if you make over $96,000 a year, you move into the 22% tax bracket. That's not good. Now, other things we do are very tax efficient. So Missy does gig work, which is Walmart, Spark, DoorDash, Uber. There's been some changes lately that made that insanely tax efficient. So let me explain. We did the initial numbers last night for her mileage. Now, for every mile she drives while working doing that, she gets 70 cents she can write off. All right? And then all the tips are now tax-free. Now, for most low earning income people, that's not really going to help much because the standard deduct is going to wipe off all your income anyways. But for higher earners, people that are in these higher brackets, that's a big deal. So essentially that's going to get wiped off all the taxes. Now, since these companies basically pay nothing, it's mostly the tips you get. You will be able to wipe out between the mileage and the no tax on tips almost all of her income for the year. So that's close to probably $35,000 for the year getting wiped off that 180 number I told you earlier. So making $180,000 a year and then you wipe that off, and then you have the standard deduct which comes in and wipes out all the short-term capital gains at the bottom or regular income. So we have another, say, $12,000 from YouTube for the year. That'll wipe out a piece of that. So we will squeeze under that bracket by the time I'm all said and done, fudging the tax numbers and making everything correct. I mean, everything we're doing is legal and honest, but we will squeeze just below that number before the year is over. So first part is always to stay under that $96,000, and we already do that. Now the second part is how you're taxed under that bracket. So under that bracket, if it's regular income like from your job, or if it's short-term capital gains, which most of our dividend or distribution paying assets are, automatically is going to be 10% for the first almost 24,000 and 12% all the way from that amount up to the 96,000 that I told you. So those two tax brackets aren't terrible. But what if I told you there's assets that have a good yield, but it could also not count as income for years, and then after that would qualify for long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains all in one. So a long-term capital gain from zero money to 96,000 is zero taxable income. All right? So you pay no taxes. None. This is how most people who retire off index funds do it. Because once you've held it for a year, when you sell some of the index funds, it's zero. So the first 96,000 is basically tax-free. It's a very simple strategy, but you have to have a lot of money to run the index fund strategy, taking the 4% rule. So taking our dividends into account, there are assets like TDAQ, that's TDAQ, and TSPY. Both of those are from TAP Alpha. All right, and then you have NEOS with SPYI and QQQI. Now, all of these employ a similar strategy. All right, so the first thing they do is by working the premium in and out, they are able to do constructive return of capital. Now, I'm going to explain this and then I'll give you an example of how it truly works. So essentially what happens is these guys sell calls on an index option, which is different from standard options. The index options allows for them to have a specialized tax treatment called 1256. This tax treatment gives you 60% long-term capital gains and 40% short-term capital gains. Now, if you just think about it, if you're paying in that, say, the 12% bracket on an investment, so say any yield max or any other short-term investment, you're paying 12% on that. If the same amount of income were compared and you could have 0% tax on 60% of it, and on 40% of it you'd have the short-term 12% on, you're saving a ton of money. Now do that on $100,000. The money is quickly saved, large amounts. So your tax bill goes down. Now for a full-on example, they also do return of capital. Now, how much each one does will vary on the year. But to give you an example, last year, SPYI, which has a 12% yield, did 90% of their distribution for that year, actually over 90%, was return of capital. Now they have the ability to continue to repeat that for 8 years before you get back to your cost basis. So for 8 years, you only pay taxes on 10% of it. But because they're giving you what is in essence your own money back with return of capital, you don't realize that as income unless you sell it. So what I'm telling you is it doesn't count as income pretty much. You'll have a little bit left that'll be that 60-40 split, but you can do that for 8 years. Think about the taxes you'd save. Now that also helps because since it doesn't count as income, it doesn't go against you for health insurance. So for the ACA, everything we have in these funds almost doesn't count for income. So which keeps us under that 84K. So that's strategy one going forward, is going to be to get into return of capital assets that allow us to not show that as income for years to come. Strategy two is any of these high yield with NAV erosion, we are getting out of. We will get into more stable funds move that money downward, which both of these moves are going to cost us income. We're going to make less because the yields are lower, but we don't have to reinvest, which saves us money. Some of the names we're looking at will be like FEPI, XDTE, probably a little bit of AIPI, but not much. Maggie. I mean, just these names that are not so much eroding away. They're pretty much just kind of stationary. They run sideways. They have decent yields. This will just skew our yield. So if we can get another $2,000 out of those kind of investments and $2,000 out of the return of capital investments, that's $4,000 right there a month. But on paper, we're only showing a little over $2,000 as far as ACA healthcare goes. Now the next strategy we're going to deploy will mess us up for 2 years, okay? This is going to make it hard on us for the next 2 years because this will make us not qualify for ACA. But we're working forward on a 2-year plan here to be able to go back to getting on ACA healthcare, but to be making more at that point in time on a month to have to spend than we are now and paying almost no taxes. So the plan is to do 2 giant Roth conversions. And anybody who has access to fill a Roth and you're not retired yet, you should be doing it every year. The power behind these investments is amazing. So what we're doing is we are converting from a traditional IRA to Roth IRA. And over the next 2 years, we will also be contributing to our Roth IRA. The point is to get as much money in there as possible. Now, let me explain why this is relevant. So you can take contributions out at any time in a Roth, okay? The money you put in, you can take back out, penalty, tax-free, everything free, because you've already paid taxes on it. Now, we have a lot of contributions in ours. So what we're going to do is we're going to transfer $40,000 in 2026 from the traditional to the Roth. And then in 2027, we're going to transfer $60,000 from the traditional to the Roth. Now doing this, it all counts as income and you do have to pay taxes on it. That is why it's going to mess us up for the 2 years for ACA, because between our income from that, other sources of income from like YouTube and stuff, our dividend portfolio, we're going to be way over the ACA limits. And like I said, it's $1,300 a month. So what we're going to do is use short-term health care, and I will make a whole video on that. It is definitely not for everyone, but there's certain situations where it's really helpful. They have indemnities and they have PPOs and there's different time constraints and how long you're allowed to do it. So it's really a state-by-state basis, but I'm not even going to try and go through it all here. We will make a separate video on it the best we can, all right? Because it is very state-centric to what they allow. But we're going to use that, and currently it's looking like it's going to be about $400 a month, including separate dental insurance, okay? That is much cheaper, but there's so many limits to these plans, and there's actually a top out. So don't think of this as a good thing. And when we put the plan out, we will show you as many of the pitfalls as we can, because there's a lot of them. But doing this allows us to convert our Roth. The reasoning behind this is that will put us at a point where we can pull our contributions to create more income every month. The contributions won't be taxed. Once we get to the point where Missy crosses the 59.5 range, she can start pulling anything in the Roth, which these giant conversions we're moving over will be sitting there and growing, but also we will be growing them, selling options in there. Now, I also will be contributing to my Roths more and growing them more, so those will also be available, but I will only be able to pull the contributions out. But theoretically, the plan is to be able to pull $1,000 to $2,000 every month out of that account to subsidize our living. The beauty of this, though, is it does not count against your ACA healthcare. It is not income. It is not anything. It has already been taxed. It's already been done. You just pull it out, which means we won't pay any higher taxes. We won't pay any higher ACA because it doesn't count. So now you have the two factors that are doing here, the return of capital and the ACA going down because of the Roth. So between Roth and the return of capital, we're going to pay almost no taxes through these years. Now, when the return of capital runs out on these investments, it's a 60-40 split. So it's still better than the options we're holding right now. Now, there is one more thing we have to talk about in this whole thing, and that is options. We sell options to create income. Now, if we wanted to start selling index options, we could get that same 60-40 that I talked about, but there's a large barrier of cost to that. Getting into them, some of them are as high as like $3,000 a share. So yeah, big cost barrier. We are looking at some other options, but in reality, it may come to where we need to reduce how many options we sell in our taxable account. We can do as many as we want in the traditional IRAs, the Roth IRAs, anything like that is fine. But as far as in the taxable account, we may have to cut back some. But I'd like to lay out a blueprint of exactly what this is going to look like. So right now we are planning the long term, so it would be 3 years from now, to make $1,000 a month from YouTube, to make $2,000 a month from return of capital assets, to make $2,000 a month from non-return of capital assets, to make another $2,000 a month from options. All right, so that makes $7,000 a month. Now, in that same year, we would be pulling from our Roth, let's say $1,000 a month just for a number. We are now at $8,000 a month. Okay? Now, the other side of this is that though you're making $8,000 a month, you have $3,000 of that doesn't even count as income because it's return of capital and the Roth. So you're only actually paying on $5,000. So essentially on paper, you're looking at $60,000 of income. Here's where the numbers get pretty cool though. When you stack taxes, the short term and the income go to the bottom, long term goes up. But your standard deduct takes from the bottom. So $31,000, let's say, as the standard deduct, will knock out half of that. So we have $30,000 in taxes. I can tell you just from the top of my head, you're going to end up paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 or $5,000 in taxes on that. So let's run the numbers again. If you're getting, say, $8,000 a month, like we talked about, you're basically going to be making, let's see, around $100,000 a year. You're going to be paying $5,000 of taxes. It's kind of strange to hear that, but that's how the system works. The other point is we'll be paying $600 a month for full health care insurance in 3 years by using the ACA and staying under that $84,000 line. So when you think about the whole system, it seems great to just run out and make as much money as possible and worry about the ramifications of the tax and the healthcare, but that is not the way our system is built. Now, there's a lot of other strategies. You could put stuff in a business, you could do all these things, but I don't want to have to manage those things and worry about it. While talking to my wife, I asked her, what would you spend $8,000 a month on? What would you buy? What would you do with it? And she was quick to give me some basic ideas, some basic options. And I said, we're not going to buy a new car every year. When, another one she said was a world cruise. I said, we're not going to take a world cruise every year. Could you? Yeah, you could. I can promise you, unless you're one of them people that just thrives for travel, sooner or later you're going to want to go home. You're going to get tired of traveling and living out of a suitcase. So anything more than that is just extra. I mean, it seems silly to say with so many people struggling nowadays, but we moved down into this tiny house and it costs us next to nothing to live here. So all this income we're making, I mean, our bills don't even come to over $2,000 a month usually. So it's really hard to set out to pay a bunch of extra taxes at 22%, pay insane healthcare premiums for no reason other than to say you did it. So our portfolio changes will be coming, our system will be changing, and we will be making videos along the way. I think that after everybody starts seeing how we're playing this out, it will make more sense. I know sitting here saying we're going to go from making $180,000 to on paper making $60,000, $50,000 seems crazy. But the system's set up this way. All right, it literally is set up this way. And if you learn how to work it and want to live within the parameters of it, then you should be fine. But if you just go into it like I did, with your eyes open but not paying attention, you could get bit pretty hard. It's going to cost us 2 pretty aggressive years to fix this. Now, along the way, we're still going to be living a really good life. It's just one of those things where we have maybe a lesser degree of healthcare and probably a lot bigger tax bill because I have to pay all these conversions for this Roth. But we're going to be in such a position when we're done that it's going to be a very strange feeling, because when you start telling yourself, I need to sell less options, but you still have plenty of income, it's a very odd feeling. It's hard to pull the reins back, but sometimes you have to do it. And I think that anyone who knows numbers, this will make sense too. Other people, they may have to do a little bit of research on it to understand fully what we're saying. And that's why we're going to do videos on each individual part to lay out the strategy so you can see how we're changing our retirement and especially our portfolio to be more tax efficient and more cost effective on the healthcare side, because those are the two things that will clobber your retirement if you're not paying attention. We are all taught to cut your tax bill now in your working years. Put it into a traditional or a 401k. I'm telling you now, pay the taxes and put it in a Roth. You will not be sorry. All right, you really will not. Now, I will say that on a conversion, you are not supposed to touch those funds for 5 years. Okay? I just want to say that right up front. There is a Roth ladder. I think anybody who's interested in retiring early should pay attention to these things because they are powerful tools. And if you get them set up 5 years before you retire, oh, you're going to be in a good place. You're going to be coming out at a good place because you can take that money out after 5 years with zero penalty. Zero penalty means no taxes, no penalty. That's a powerful tool in retirement. And so many people don't realize you got to fill your Roth. Even if your work says you got to use a 401k, usually they'll match you on your 401k, but they'll offer a Roth and you can contribute to that too. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And with that said, I'd love to hear down in the comments what you guys think. Can you understand from a tax and from a healthcare standing why people would have to pivot in their retirement and change things up? We are changing things up. We could do this way simpler if we were willing to accept $5,000 a month. You just flip your assets in your in your portfolio and move on. But we're doing this whole flip with the Roth because we do want to make a bunch of money every month. We just don't want to be taxed on it. So we're taking the hit over the next 2 years to have an amazing lifestyle after that. So let me know down in the comments what you think, your ideas. If you have any ideas for tweaks or other investments that would fit into this strategy, let us know. And if you haven't already, and I don't know why you wouldn't have, go down, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can see all of our upcoming videos. Let us know what you think, and I will see you in the next one.